X-Men Apocalypse came out in 2016. It was directed by Bryan Singer and stars pretty much everyone we've seen in First Class and a few of the other X-Men movies. When an ancient, all-powerful mutant comes back to life with intentions to cause world destruction, X-Men of the past and new recruits team up to face the threat. I'm wrapping up my X-Men reviews. I started with First Class, then did Days of Future Past, and now Apocalypse. This is all because the New Mutants just dropped a couple of weeks ago. Still have not seen the movie because of its awful reviews, but I thought I may as well just go back and review some of the newest X-Men movies, and this has been a ton of fun. Now, when Apocalypse came out back in 2016, that was right around when I started my YouTube channel. I began in early May, and this movie came out in late May. I, at that point, never saw any of the X-Men movies, so I did not see this movie in theaters. But I eventually watched it a couple of years later and really enjoyed this movie. I had no clue why nobody liked this movie. At least a lot of people did not like Apocalypse back in 2016. This movie has a 47% on Rotten Tomatoes. After rewatching it for the first time since then, I can now understand why some people do not like Apocalypse. It does have problems. This is probably the most flawed out of the three in this X-Men trilogy, but it might just be the most exciting and action-packed out of the three as well. The movie opens with several characters being introduced or reintroduced into the X-Men franchise. It starts with Apocalypse, and then we go from character to character like Mystique, Nightcrawler, Professor X, Magneto, even Cyclops is introduced in this movie. The film is overloaded to the max with characters, and I'm sure a lot of people were not too fond with how many characters X-Men Apocalypse has to offer. For me, I actually kind of like it. Just like in Days of Future Past, we have multiple characters from the X-Men franchise that we love, but at the same time, not everyone is utilized as much as we would like them to be. So that absolutely does cause some problems. This movie has a little bit too many characters for its own good. We get some of the characters from X-Men First Class, younger versions of characters we already know, the Four Horsemen, and characters from other movies like Quicksilver and Moira, plus the film's main villain, Apocalypse, which I will get into right now. Oscar Isaac does his best with what he's given in this film. It's not too much. His dialogue is mediocre. He talks with a very deep voice. Sometimes it's hard to understand what exactly he's saying, and that's about as much as we get from Oscar Isaac. He does not have very much to do in this movie. His character with his powers does, but in terms of performance, not so much. I don't think he deserves any hate. He's not bad in this movie. He's perfectly fine. The villain Apocalypse, I can completely understand why people don't like him. He is generic. He's by the numbers. You've seen a billion villains like this before in cinema. And so it is a little bit disappointing to see Apocalypse be so one-dimensional, but I do really like him as a villain because of his powers. This guy is extremely powerful. He's got to be one of the most powerful supervillains of all time. People talk about Thanos as one of the strongest. What about Apocalypse? This dude can cut guys' heads off with sand, and he can melt their faces into walls. This dude is almost indestructible. I have no idea why he's never discussed as one of the most powerful supervillains of all time. And his powers are amplified to the max along with his Four Horsemen, so that's why I like him so much. I know he's generic and one-dimensional, but his powers are very strong. He has to be one of the strongest supervillains of all time. And I know I have to mention this point when doing a review for X-Men Apocalypse. It's been about 20 years between X-Men First Class and X-Men Apocalypse. And nobody has aged. Everyone since First Class looks like the same exact person over the course of 20 years, which makes absolutely no sense. How has not a single character aged? The only character it makes sense for comes in Days of Future Past. That's Logan, because he never ages. But every other character, including people who aren't mutants like Moira, she doesn't age either, and they even make a point about it in the movie. Professor X says, oh, she hasn't aged a day. It's just, why? Why did you have to make this movie 20 years after First Class? And why did Days of Future Past have to be 10 years after First Class? Why could these movies not have come just a few years after each other? At least by having all three movies separated by a couple of years, you avoid that aging plot hole. And in Dark Phoenix, it gets even more laughable because in just a couple of years, James McAvoy goes from looking so young to looking as old as Patrick Stewart. Oh my god. So that's definitely one of the reasons why people don't like X-Men Apocalypse over that of the previous X-Men movies. Also, the acting and dialogue from time to time isn't very good. In particular, coming from Sophie Turner, who we know from Game of Thrones, she has an American accent in this movie and is not very good. I don't know if it's the film's dialogue or her attempting to do an American accent, but in this movie, it just does not work with Sophie Turner. She does not come off at all convincing, and the same can kind of be said for Ty Sheridan. Neither one of them are strong in this movie. Everyone else definitely overshadows them. But if you can ignore some of those elements in X-Men Apocalypse, you can certainly enjoy this movie from beginning to end. Most notably, the what-ifs in this film. What if 20th Century Fox was never bought by Disney? Even though Sophie Turner is not great in X-Men Apocalypse, her character does have some direction. You can tell that they care about developing Jean Grey and have places for her character to go eventually down the line in this franchise. Quicksilver is back in this movie, and he does have a subplot where his father is actually Magneto, so that adds a ton of development to him. But unfortunately, we never get to see him confront Magneto in the film, saying that he is his son. That would have paid off significantly, but that never happens in the movie for some reason, and we were forced to wait. Now we're never going to get that chance to see that happen. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender are once again great in X-Men Apocalypse. Just like in First Class and Days of Future Past, these guys are giving it their all. And it makes me so sad that those characters will likely be casted in Disney's MCU. I don't know why they can't just bring them back in the MCU. Like, it doesn't make any sense. These guys deserve so much better. You can tell that 20th Century Fox had more plans for these characters moving forward, but then everything went down and now we'll never get to know. But these guys are great, along with Jennifer Lawrence and some of the other cast members who are veterans in this movie. Along with great performances delivered from these actors, we also get some very good character development, which we have not seen from any of these characters since X-Men First Class. Like, for instance, Magneto has a family in Apocalypse, and his family is killed, which adds so much depth to his backstory, and Professor X gets back together with Moira, which we have not seen since First Class. So both characters get a lot of character development, and their characters are definitely taken really well care of in this movie. I do want to mention a few small positives and negatives that I gathered while rewatching X-Men Apocalypse that could make or break this film for many people. The first positive is that we get not just one, but two great Quicksilver scenes. But one of my negatives does include Moira, when she's in Cairo, lets a light in down this tunnel, and somehow that awakens Apocalypse. Like, how did that not happen ever over the course of history until now? Then for some reason, Magneto is not in prison after what he did in X-Men Days of Future Past. The dude almost killed the president and his entire cabinet, and yet he has escaped just like he did after every other X-Men movie. And it also happens at the end of this film because he almost destroys the entire world, and yet again he is let off the hook. How many times could this possibly happen? Also, Havoc dies in this movie? Why kill him off? What's the point of that? And nobody cared whatsoever when he was killed in this movie. The only one that showed a little bit of emotion is his brother, Cyclops. And even then, it's not that impactful. My other positive is Wolverine's cameo. It might be better than Wolverine's cameo in X-Men First Class, because it is a bloodfest. I'm surprised they allowed as much blood as they did in this scene, because this movie is PG-13. It's not rated R, so that was pretty freaking sweet to see in a PG-13 movie. But I am confused why Wolverine is still under the influence of Stryker, because at the end of Days of Future Past, Mystique is disguised as Stryker, and it's implied that she saves him. So why exactly is Wolverine still in this facility with Stryker? I don't have an answer for you. Those are just a few small things I noticed. The finale in X-Men Apocalypse, whoo, this thing might be the best out of all the finales in the X-Men franchise thus far. It's action-packed, has several great character moments, and near the end of this finale, we actually feel something, which is not the case in other X-Men movies like The Last Stand. So thank you, Apocalypse, because I do feel something. I do have emotions coming out by the end of X-Men Apocalypse's finale. Overall, I do think X-Men Apocalypse is the most flawed out of the three in this X-Men trilogy. It's overstuffed with characters, has a generic main villain, and a few plot holes do make this movie not worth your watch over the first two. But the positives, in my opinion, absolutely outweigh the negatives in X-Men Apocalypse, and I am giving this movie an 87%. That may surprise some of you. I understand this movie does have problems, but it has a lot of action, great character moments, a lot of character development, and really great performances coming from our leads once again, like James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, among many others. So I don't understand completely why people hate this movie, but I do get why some people have problems with it because it's not a perfect film. One last thing to wrap up my X-Men series, I got this keychain when I saw Dark Phoenix in theaters last summer, and it's the only thing that reminds me of that movie. If I got rid of this thing, I guess I would never think of that movie ever again, but it's still on my car keys, and I think I should dispose of it. But I think it also looks really cool, so I don't want to do that. Alright, for those of you who also enjoy X-Men Apocalypse, think it's a pretty darn good movie, be sure to let me down below in the comment section what your thoughts are of it, or do you hate it? Do you think this is the worst X-Men movie to date? Let me know. As always, if you are new to my channel, click the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thank you all so much for watching this video, and I hope you all have a fantastic day.